98.7 WFGR, Cruel Summer. It is 8:27. Andy, Dave Cagley. How about laying a traffic report on us real quick?
All right, looking okay up and down 131, the Ford, I-96, M6. No major incidents or accidents so far this morning. Construction slowdowns continuing 28th between Kraft and Patterson. Still down to one lane in both directions there. If you're heading out towards the Lakeshore, east and westbound I-96, 112th Avenue, down to one lane there until, I believe, early December. And southbound 131. Actually, a post drive, I believe, new construction getting underway today as well. That's traffic on 98.7 WFGR.
55 degrees right now and sunshine right on through next week. So enjoy that. Nice weekend on tap for everybody. Dave has brought a guest back. It's a return visit.
That's right. Now, this counts as the third guest I brought in, even though I brought her in twice.
I count for two.
Yeah,
I'm a 2 for 1.
That's how good she is.
She's a great guest.
No pressure.
Anny Donnewald, nice to see you again.
It's nice to see you guys. Good morning.
Let's give a little background on Anny. You started off as a college kid.
I did.
You started off as an exotic dancer.
I did.
In your college years.
Indeed.
And it kind of led you down a pretty rough path there.
It went slippery.
Yeah, really quick.
Pretty quick. It did.
Yeah.
I was in the industry for 6 years. I ended up escorting out in Vegas and Beverly Hills until I was radically changed.
Yep.
And then I started an organization called Eve's Angels, where we help girls. We set up support groups across the country for girls that are in the sex industry. And when they're ready to get out, we give them the resources to change.
So you give them education, you
Yep.
help them out financially.
Yep.
Counseling, all
resumes,
that stuff.
all that stuff. All that stuff.
You've built an amazing organization.
Thank
and that's
you.
one of the reasons we wanted to have you back, because I'm a huge fan of the one person that thinks they can make a difference.
Yeah.
And
I'm
as
a big
crazy as
fan
the
too.
idea might seem, they make it. Because it's that crazy. They just push it, and then they have...
And they don't sleep, and they drink a lot of Red Bull.
You just got back from Chicago.
I did at 3 in the morning.
Wow.
Actually.
Yeah.
We were Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. We have our support groups out there, and then we outreach into the clubs on the streets, in the massage parlors. And so we were in the clubs last night, just talking to the girls. We take them cookies and roses and stuff like that. So I got in at about 3, and I woke up and joined You Fine People this morning.
And here you are.
Here I am.
Now, you partner with churches when you do this
I do.
sometimes, too.
I do.
So what is that like for them, bringing them into that atmosphere?
I'm kind of like the translator. So I always say that the church is a culture. There's church culture, and then there's sex industry culture. And I'm like the one that does the translating, because for so long the church has been said, we don't go to those places. So I'm kind of saying, no, actually, we're supposed to go to those places.
This is where you're needed.
This is where
Right.
we're supposed to go, and not to go and say, well, you're not supposed to do this. That's none of your business. That's between them and God. But just to say, hey, if you ever need anything, we're here for you. That's what originally that's what the job of the church is. So, some churches have kicked us out, and some churches have embraced us fully and said, this is totally what we should be doing. And it kind of is like, there's no gray area. It's pretty much black and white. Where do you stand with this?
Yeah.
Right.
Now, one of the things that we wanted to bring up, and Dave had this idea last week, was this whole trafficking thing that keeps coming up, and we keep hearing about it over and over and over. Talk a little bit about what trafficking. I mean, that's the.
There's a buzzword.
That's
now,
the
right?
buzzword.
Yeah.
Trafficking,
There's a buzzword,
sex
and
trafficking.
the buzzword started happening for me in the church, and I'm like, trafficking, and everybody's all excited, and it's like this new sexy thing to do. Getting involved with trafficking, and then culturally we're starting to catch on. Like, well, what is this?
Yeah.
And I went to Amsterdam. How it kind of unfolded for me, and how I really started to become an advocate for the victims of trafficking, and I'm using air quotes, is that I went to Amsterdam. There was so much hype, and they're like, you have to watch these movies, these documentaries about trafficking. And I'm thinking, what are you talking about? And so I went to Amsterdam. Somebody asked me to go to Amsterdam to go to the red light district and meet some girls there. So I went, and everybody was hyping it up like, oh, it's so bad over internationally. It's so bad in Thailand, and it's so bad in Amsterdam. So I was really geared up, ready to go. And when I got there, I'm like, oh, this is it. And then it occurred to me, we have a much bigger problem with this buzzword called trafficking that's really just a modern day sexy word for pimping back in the United States.
Okay.
So
it's not even on the same level. We were talking about this off the air. It was just a month ago, the FBI busted in 75 cities, found over 100 victims of sex trafficking, and most of them were between the ages of 13 and 17, and there were so many of them, they actually had to resort to putting some of them in jail because they didn't have anywhere else to house them.
This is the thing, and this has been the big epidemic with the sex trafficking situation. And number one is the ignorance of the fact that it's going on, because so many times, and I find this a lot in Grand Rapids, is that, that doesn't happen here.
Yeah.
And it's like, we're in Grand Rapids, so it's all nice, and no, it's happening here.
I don't know if you remember this, you guys, you might be a little young, but there was a movie that came out that was started in Grand Rapids. It was called Hardcore.
I haven't seen it.
It starred George C. Scott. It's an older movie.
Okay.
And it's all about this girl that gets pulled into this industry. And then all of a sudden her dad, through a friend of a friend of a friend or whatever, they see the tape, the film back then, because it's old. This is an old movie.
It's like a VCR situation.
Yeah.
Betamax.
And they start off shooting right over by Richmond Park. They've got the Pamplin Hotel in it. I mean, it was based right here in Grand Rapids. George C. Scott played the investigator that started looking into this. So
it's happening.
Don't be shocked that it's going on right here.
Happening here. And I think a lot of the reason why people don't know that it's happening here is because they don't really fully understand what it is.
Yeah.
There's definitions and laws of trafficking, and it's basically, especially for minors, if they're coerced. That's one of the definitions of being trafficked. If they've been coerced, and the person that's coercing them into selling sex, and they're profiting off of it.
Right.
So it's pimping, but we don't like that word because that brings up an image. The traffickers.
Everybody sees Huggy Bear.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. It's like Starsky and Hutch.
Right.
Joe. So we have this idea of what it is, but I mean, I've heard of stories where it's like soccer dads, soccer coaches were trafficking the girls and inviting them over for sleeping, over for sleepovers, and then they were like 13, 14 years old. So I've heard these horrific stories, and I'm like, this is America. And so it's modern day slavery. And here's the other myth, is that it's this guy pulling up in like the kiddie rape van, and he's busting a girl over the head and dragging her into the van.
Right.
And I'm not saying, and shooting her up with heroin and keeping her in the basement. I'm not saying that doesn't happen, but it's a lot trickier than that. I mean, a lot of these teenagers are being targeted because they're either missing a father figure or they're runaways. Runaways is a big deal. And they're being picked up by these guys that are like, hey, you're beautiful. Let me take you shopping. So they're getting they're playing to that emotional piece where these girls aren't even emotionally developed yet.
Right.
But they're feeding these men that are 40 years old, or sometimes even women. That's the other myth. These people are older, and they're preying on these young girls to feed their emotional needs, and then they're putting them on Backpage.com.
What are some of the warning signs that parents should look for? You might have an idea something's going on. You're probably going to deny it because everybody thinks that can't happen to my kid.
Of course.
Right.
What do they look for?
You need to, I have a teenage daughter, and I'm very aware of who she's with. I'm very aware of where she's going. I'm very aware of, I keep up with her on even social media. That's another thing that they prey on, is social media. So their Facebook and Twitter. And don't turn into a Nazi. I don't mean like that. But at the same time, you need to be aware of what's going on. Where's your kid going to spend the night?
Right.
Where's your kid when you're working? You need to know, your child needs to be accountable, because you need to protect your child.
Right.
Teenage girls are being preyed on a regular basis, and then these girls think that this is their boyfriend.
Yeah.
You can also tell because teenage girls will all of a sudden be having Prada bags and Gucci bags, and all of a sudden they have these new, where are you getting that? You're 15.
Right.
You know what I mean? Your boyfriend, air quotes, is buying it for you. That's not your boyfriend if he's selling you for sex and he's making the money.
What age does this start off at? I mean,
I think, and don't quote me, please Google, but I think the average age is 13 to 15 that girls are getting targeted for this. But and we've heard stories as young as 9. It's happening. There's some sick stuff going on out there, and people need to really be aware. And that's the number one thing. You need to be aware, and then you need to figure out, all right, what are we going to do about this? I'm working with a senator in the state of Michigan to start getting some laws implemented, because this shouldn't be legal. This isn't.
It's not, though.
It's not, but it's not being implemented because, and this is what I wanted to tell you about the jails, is that I'm working with a sheriff's department in another state. I don't want to get into, but I'm working with a sheriff's department, and, they recognize that there was a problem because so many times, and we've had this problem, girls are being arrested. So by the time they're 18, they have all these felonies of prostitution, but they don't realize, what the law doesn't realize is a lot of times they were being trafficked. They were pimped out on the street, not able to come in, or else they had nowhere to go. They had no food. And they said, listen, you go out there and make $500, or else you don't get to come back in. So then they get picked up by the police. They've got this huge felony record, and now we can't help them get a job.
Right.
So it's just a big misunderstanding. It's an ignorance of the thing is also the epidemic, other than the trafficking situation.
Yeah. We're talking to Anny Donnowald, who founded Eve's Angels. How many years have you been doing this now?
Too many. No, 3.
It's only 3 years?
Long time. Yeah.
3 years, and you're worldwide with this.
We're in 7 cities, and I do some international travel. Yep.
That is amazing.
Like I said, dude, the one idea that just seems crazy enough catches on. She's preaching to the world.
Now, we had a situation a week ago where a former prostitute was murdered right here in Grand Rapids. Now, when you think back to your former lifestyle and you hear stories like that, or you see a story like that, do you think to yourself, my God, that could have easily been
That
me?
is my very first thought. In fact, we were working with a woman that came up missing in one of the clubs, and she was known to have done after parties, and prostitution and dancing a lot of times go hand in hand. Not all the time, but a lot of times, they go hand in hand. And so this girl she came up missing, and she had 5 children or 6 children, and nobody could find her. And then it was rumored that she was murdered. And my thing was, like, I went to bat for them. I was on the news in Detroit and stuff like that, just being the advocate, because I was hit so hard by it, because I said there's no difference between me and her other than time and circumstance. That's all that it is. If you're playing in that kind of industry and stuff like that, I mean, there's things that you had to do even just to work there. You'd have to watch where you drive. You have to switch lanes. You got to make sure nobody's following you out of work.
Right.
So yeah, there's no difference between this poor woman in Grand Rapids than me and her, other than time and circumstance. So my heart goes out to her family for sure.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a heartbreak to think that.
It's heartbreaking enough when your daughter is in there or your sister's in there,
right.
But then if it ends tragically, it's like, oh my God.
And I guess I want to say it's heartbreaking from our end of things, but it's also heartbreaking to her to have to live this kind of life, isn't it?
Yeah, it's not an easy road.
No,
nobody grows up wanting to do that.
Right, that's like a dad's biggest fear when you're like, if I have a son, this, but if it's a daughter, please, oh God, don't let her do this.
No pole.
Keep her off the pole. That's the goal, and you've succeeded. But it's unbelievable when you hear stories like this, especially in Grand Rapids, because like you're saying, that doesn't fit the image of the town.
No, that's happening here in the underground.
Then off the air before we came on too, you were talking a little bit too that some of this stuff's even going on in high schools.
Oh, a lot of it's going on in high schools.
Really?
A lot of it's going on in high schools. They skip class. These men are preying on these little girls, and it isn't. Again, it's not just men. It's sometimes there's the main guy or the main woman, and then they've recruited some of the high school kids. Well, then they put the high school kids in charge of recruiting the younger high school kids, and then they make money off of the younger high school kids. So.
Now, have you found this as a problem in like even smaller towns and communities?
Oh yeah, it's
like
like they're being recruited because they don't understand what it is. See, it's the ignorance of what sex trafficking truly is and what it really looks like. It's a monster, and so if you don't recognize the monster and it shows up in shiny shoes, you're like, oh, look at my new friend, but you don't realize what's going on. There's a conditioning process, there's a targeting process. It's serious. It's going on right here in the United States.
And it's like you're saying, it doesn't even start out as, okay, the guy meets the girl and all of a sudden
he's like, look, I'm going to sell you.
Yeah.
Right.
No, he builds up to that.
He coerces her and emotionally manipulates her, and they're good at what they do, And again, my biggest thing and the most frustrating thing for me is that I love freedom. I love freedom, and I'm a very free-spirited person, but we live in the land of the free, but we have modern-day slavery. This is slavery. They're being enslaved.
It's so scary. It's such an unbelievable thing that's going on.
Yeah, the world has changed, hasn't it?
Oh, it's amazing.
It's unbelievable. Well, why don't you give a plug to the website there?
Okay.
Go ahead.
It's www.evesangels, EVESANGELS.org.
.org. And people can get a hold of you through there if they think they have a problem. I mean, even if it's a family that thinks their kid might be.
Yep. If they have any questions, if they have, anything, we want to know, and then we want to be able to help girls that are being targeted.
And you said you wanted to throw a plug out for your tattoo friend. Listen to this story.
Oh, this is great.
So a lot of times when these girls are being trafficked and pimped.
No, this isn't great. This is unbelievable.
This is great.
No,
it's not.
I do.
No, I know what you mean. This is amazing. They brand the girls and they put barcodes on them.
Barcodes.
They tattoo barcodes on the girls.
That they're actually scannable?
I don't know that information off the top of my head.
But it's just a mark.
It's a mark, basically, like this is a product and I'm selling it. You see, because that's what you do with barcodes. And so I have a friend named Chris Baker from Ink 180, and he's at ink180.com. He's amazing. He's my tattoo artist. But he works with the FBI, and he has like a nonprofit organization.
Yeah.
And he has a system where he can take the barcodes off of the girls. So that he removes, so it's like it helps change their identity.
Unbelievable.
That is amazing.
To think
awesome?
that barcode girls.
Yeah, that's pretty sad.
It's just, but the fact that this guy's able to go in and
totally change, because that changes their
them.
life, because now you can't be identified.
Right.
There's no barcode.
Wow.
That's
unbelievable what this world's going on.
It's crazy.
It's
Anny,
shocking.
It is shocking, isn't it?
Good God.
We appreciate you coming back in, Anny.
Thanks for having me.
EvesAngels.org. Make sure you get on there if you've got any questions. You know what? I think you could. The phone's ringing here, so let's take this off the air. If they got a question, you can take care of that right then and there. Anny Donnewald, Eve's Angels, you're doing amazing work. And
Thanks.
I know, the last time we talked, you and I, we kind of had the same.
We clicked, right?